Hi everybody, how are you doing? Okay, so today we're going to talk about yeast. We're starting our yeast unit, and as you know, some of you have already read through some of the yeast notes and even done the questions. But one of the things we were going to do in class is do the yeast experiment. So each unit was going to do a different addition to the yeast. So let's talk about yeast a bit first. Remember in your notes, it is a single cell organism. Those who have taken biology, it's called eukaryotic cell. And it converts carbohydrates in the flour, like sugars, or simple carbohydrates and complex carbohydrates, from the flour into two byproducts, carbon dioxide and alcohol. So they use yeast in beer making. That's why it converts the carbs into alcohol. So it's one of the additions to beer. The history, it's dated back to like the Egyptians and the Greeks. Back in the Stone Ages really is when yeast existed. But the Egyptians were the ones that sort of perfected bread making. So the story goes that some bakers left their flour outside and it got wet. Then the next day they found that it was all frothy and foamy. But of course back then they weren't going to throw it out or waste it, so they baked with it anyway. Turned out their bread was lighter and airier and fluffier, and part of that was because the flour got wet and then wild yeast that was in the air fell into the flour and made it all bubbly. Okay, so yeast is a fungus. It's related kind of to like mushrooms, so it's in the fungi family. So that's how the first yeast sort of came about. You can still get wild yeast, but nowadays they make it, right? So Louis Pasteur was the first to isolate yeast and actually have it produced and man-made, okay? So let's talk about the types of yeast. So you've sort of heard in my notes that there is three main types. One is called active dry yeast, and that's this one. And the other is called quick rise or rapid rise or instant yeast. Those are your two main types that you find in the grocery store that we'll use at home. But bakers, they tend to use fresh yeast. So it's kind of this, comes in a block or a paste, and it's fresh. So it's already hydrated a little bit. So what I mean by hydrated is you'll see in here, I'll put a little bit in the lid here. There are some of the active dry yeast. I'm not sure if you can see in the video. And they are little balls, okay? And then this one is much smaller. So if you can see that one, much smaller grains. Okay, so there's active, or sorry, that one's the rapid rise. And this one, I'm gonna put a little more in there so you can see it better, is bigger particles. So if you can see that, oh, they're rolling everywhere, but that's okay. So they're little balls, and these ones are much smaller, okay? So what they've done with the rapid rise is they have put more yeast organisms in smaller little particles. So for one, it will dissolve better, and two, there's just more yeast in each particle. So this one we have to do something with. So here's what we're going to do in our experiment. We are going to take 6 different containers, and in each one we've put 5 mils of yeast, active dry. So we're going to work with the active dry first, because this is what you would do to hydrate your yeast. So first, all of them have 5 mils of yeast. All of them, except for this one, have 2 mils of sugar. And they're all going to have different temperature of water. So 3 things you need for yeast. Remember I said it's a living organism? So what do you and I need to live? We need 1, water. So we're going to add some water to it. 2, food. That's the sugar. And 3, we need air to breathe and warmth, right? We don't really like being in a refrigerator or when it's really cold in the winter. And we don't really like it when it's super hot, or being in an oven, for example, or in boiling water, okay? So yeast is like you and I, it's living, all right? So let's go with the experiment, shall we? Okay, so 6 different containers. The first one, I'm gonna add boiling water to it. So remember, it has 5 mils of yeast, 2 mils of sugar, and we're gonna put some boiling water in it. I happen to have a little kettle here, so I'm just gonna get my boiling water. And I'm gonna put 50 mils in. Okay, so 50 mils of boiling water in this one. Second container, I'm gonna put, I already put 10 mils of salt in there as well. So there's sugar and salt in this one and yeast. And I'm gonna put lukewarm water in that one. So I'm gonna add a little bit of boiled water to my cold water and make it lukewarm. Now this is really important to figure out how warm the water needs to be. So like I said, you and I are living. Lukewarm water should feel like a nice hot bath. So let's put our finger in there and go, it's a little bit cold. I don't think I'd want to sit in that bath. It'll get cold too fast. So I'm going to add a little bit more hot water to it. Now remember, the boiling water, I did not want to stick my finger in the boiling water, right? It does not feel good. So this one, lukewarm, that feels like a nice warm water. So nice warm bath. So I'm going to put that one in. Again, 50 mils of warm water. Okay, let's put that in there. Next one, we have just the yeast and the sugar. I'm going to put warm water in that one again, lukewarm. Got to test it, make sure it's nice and warm. Okay, there's that one. All right. Now for number 4, we are using cold water. So I have some ice water for this one. And ice water, brr, right? I would not want to sit in that. So let's do some ice water for that one. Okay. This one, number 5, has just yeast and warm water. Okay, again, I want to make sure my water is warm. Yep. And the last one, I am putting extra ingredient in here. This one has yeast, sugar, salt, yeast, sugar, salt, and oil. Okay, so there's 4 ingredients in that one, and we're going to put some lukewarm water in that one too. Okay, we're going to give all 6 of those a good stir. Okay, so give it all a nice stir. I'll put a different spoon in each one so I don't cross-contaminate. And it should look cloudy. Okay, so one of the first questions on the yeast experiment chart that you're going to fill in is whether the yeast dissolved or not. Because it is important. Right now, what we're doing is waking up the yeast in a sense. We're rehydrating it, because that's how we buy it, is in a dehydrated state, so it's inactive at that time. Okay, but once we put water back into it, this organism will start to come alive again. Alive. Okay, so let's see if the first one has dissolved the yeast. So how we can tell if the yeast is dissolved is by putting in a metal spoon and giving it a good stir to make sure none of the yeast is stuck to the bottom. And then I'm going to pull that spoon out. You'll see that it is cloudy. Okay, and I don't see any particles of yeast anymore. I put my spoon in and I look at my spoon. Oh, I'm going to look at the back because you can kind of see a couple of particles on there of yeast. Okay, so I'm going to stir it a little bit more and then see if that just needs a good stir. Okay, I think we're good. So if you see my spoon, there's no yeast particles left on there.